Hi, boys and girls. Today we have a lot of exciting things to do. I am going to read the next chapter of Percy Jackson, um, on the Lightning Thief. I know that we are about 5 pages from the end of this chapter. I don't know if we'll make it through the whole next chapter, but actually, no, it's not too bad. So altogether, it's about 15, 20 pages. So not bad at all. So I'll read this to you guys. One of the most important things today is whether you are with a sub or you are working independently in one of the other classrooms, you have to focus. You've got this. I have no doubt whatsoever that you can do it. But I will be taking this today and grading it. So make sure that you are getting the work done. Like I said, we're going to read first. We're going to do the page in the notebook that I'm going to be talking about. And then you guys will do the same thing for yours. All right, let's go ahead and switch over the camera so that you can see the book. Here we go. Percy Jackson and the Olympians. All right, and remember we were just talking about Percy and his mom going on a trip to the beach. I was on my way, honey, she told Gabe. We were just talking about the trip. Gabe's eyes got small. The trip? You mean you were serious about that? I knew it, I murmured. He won't let us go. Of course he will, my mom said evenly. Your stepfather's just worried about money, that's all. Besides, she added, Gabriel won't have to settle for bean dip. I'll make him enough 7-layer dip for the whole weekend. Guacamole, sour cream, the works. Gabe softened a bit. So this money for your trip, it comes out of your clothes budget, right? Yes, honey, my mother said. And you won't take my car anywhere but there and back. We'll be very careful. Gabe scratched his double chin. Maybe if you hurry with that 7-layer dip, and maybe if the kid apologizes for interrupting my poker game. Maybe if I kick you in your soft spot, I thought, I'll make you sing soprano for a week. But my mom's eyes warned me not to make him mad. Why did she put up with this guy? I wanted to scream. Why did she care what he thought? I'm sorry, I muttered. I'm really sorry I interrupted your incredibly important poker game. Please go back to it right now. Gabe's eyes narrowed. His tiny brain was probably trying to detect sarcasm in my statement. Yeah, whatever, he decided. He went back to his game. Thank you, Percy, my mom said. Once we get to Monotalk, we'll talk more about whatever you've forgotten to tell me, okay? For a moment, I thought I saw anxiety in her eyes. The same fear I'd seen in Grover during the bus ride, as if my mom, too, felt an odd chill in the air. But then her smile returned, and I figured I must have been mistaken. She ruffled my hair and went to make Gabe his 7-layer dip. An hour later, we were ready to leave. Gabe took a break from his poker game long enough to watch me lug my mom's bag to the car. He kept griping and groaning about losing her cooking, and more important, his 76 Camaro for the whole weekend. Not a scratch on this car, brain boy, he warned me as I loaded the last bag. Not one little scratch. Like I'd be the one driving. I was 12. But that didn't matter to Gabe. If a seagull so much as pooped on his paint job, he'd find a way to blame me. Watching him lumber back toward the apartment building, I got so mad I did something I can't explain. As Gabe reached the doorway, I made the hand gesture I'd seen Grover make on the bus, sort of for warding off evil gesture, a clawed hand over my heart, then a shoving movement toward Gabe. The screen door slammed shut so hard. The screen door slammed shut so hard it whacked him in the butt and sent him flying up the staircase as if he'd been shot from a cannon. Maybe it was just the wind or some freak accident with hinges, but I didn't stay long enough to find out. I got in the Camaro and told my mom to step on it. Our rental cabin was on the South Shore, way out at the tip of Long Island. It was a little pastel box with faded curtains half sunken into the dunes. There was always sand in the sheets and spiders in the cabinets, and most of the time the sea was too cold to swim in. I loved the place. We'd been going there since I was a baby. My mom had been going there even longer. She never exactly said, but I know why the beach was special to her. It was the place where she'd met my dad. As we got closer to Montauk, she seemed to grow younger, years of worry and work disappearing from her face. Her eyes turned the color of the sea. We got there at sunset, opened all the cabin's windows, and went through our usual cleaning routine. We walked on the beach, fed blue corn chips to the seagulls, and munched on blue jelly beans, blue saltwater taffy, and other free samples my mom had brought from work. I guess I should explain the blue food. See, Gabe had once told my mom there was no such thing. They had this fight, which seemed like a really small thing at the time, but ever since, my mom went out of her way to eat blue. She baked blue birthday cakes. She mixed up blueberry smoothies. She bought blue corn tortilla chips and brought home blue candy from the shop. This, along with keeping her maiden name, Jackson, rather than calling herself Mrs. Ugliano, was proof that she wasn't totally suckered by Gabe. She did have a rebellious streak like me. When it got dark, we made a fire. We roasted hot dogs and marshmallows. Mom told me stories about when she was a kid, back before her parents died in the plane crash. She told me about the books she wanted to write someday when she had enough money to quit the candy shop. Eventually, I got up the nerve to ask her about what was always on my mind whenever it came to Montauk, my father. My mom's eyes went all misty. I figured she would tell me the same thing she always did, but I never got tired of hearing them. He was kind, Percy, she said. Tall, handsome, and powerful, but gentle too. You have his black hair, you know, and his green eyes. Mom fished a blue jelly bean out of her candy bag. I wished he could see you, Percy. He would be so proud. I wondered how she could say that. What was so great about me, a dyslexic, hyperactive boy with a D+ report card, kicked out of school for the 6th time in 6 years? How old was I? I asked. I mean, when he left. She watched the flames. He was only with me for one summer, Percy, right here at this beach, this cabin. But he knew me as a baby. No, honey. He knew I was expecting a baby, but he never saw you. He had to leave before you were born. I tried to square with the fact that I seemed to remember something about my father. A warm glow, a smile. I had always assumed he knew me as a baby. My mom had never said it outright, but still it felt like it must be true. Now to be told he'd never even seen me. I felt angry at my father. Maybe it was stupid, but I resented him for going on that ocean voyage, for not having the guts to marry my mom. He'd left us, and now we were stuck with smelly Gabe. Are you going to send me away again? I asked her, to another boarding school. She pulled a marshmallow from the fire. I don't know, honey. Her voice was heavy. I think I think we'll have to do something because you don't want me around. I regretted the words as soon as they were out. My mom's eyes welled with tears. She took my hand, squeezed it tight. Percy, oh, Percy, no. I have to, honey, for your own good. I have to send you away. Her words reminded me of what Mr. Brunner had said, that it was the best for me to leave Yancey, because I'm not normal. I said, you say that as if it's a bad thing, Percy, but you don't realize how important you are. I thought Yancey Academy would be far enough away. I thought you'd finally be safe. Safe from what? She met my eyes, and a flood of memories came back to me, all the weird, scary things that had ever happened to me, some of which I'd tried to forget. During 3rd grade, a man in a black trench coat had stalked me on the playground. When the teachers threatened to call the police, he went away growling, but no one believed me when I told them that under his broad-brimmed hat, the man only had one eye, right in the middle of his head. Before that, a really early memory, I was in preschool and a teacher accidentally put me down for a nap in a cot that a snake had slithered into. My mom screamed when she came to pick me up and found me playing with a limp, scaly rope. I'd somehow managed to strangle to death with my meaty toddler hands. In every single school, something creepy had happened, something unsafe, and I was forced to move. I knew I should tell my mom about the old ladies at the fruit stand and Mrs. Dodds at the art museum, but my weird hallucination said I'd sliced my math teacher into dust with a sword, but I couldn't make myself tell her. I had a strange feeling that the news would end our trip to Montauk, and I didn't want that. I've tried to keep you as close to me as I could, my mom said. They told me that was a mistake. But there's only one other option, Percy. The place your father wanted me to send you, and I just can't stand to do it. My father wanted to send me to a special school? Not a school, she said softly. A summer camp. My head was spinning. Why would my dad, who hadn't even stayed long enough to see me born, talk to my mom about a summer camp? And if it's so important, why hadn't she ever mentioned it before? I'm sorry, Percy, she said, seeing the look in my eyes, but I can't talk about it. I couldn't send you to that place. It might mean saying goodbye to you for good. For good, but if it's only a summer camp. She turned toward the fire, and I knew from her expression that if I asked her any more questions, she would start to cry. That night I had a vivid dream. It was storming on the beach, and two beautiful animals, a white horse and a golden eagle, were trying to kill each other at the edge of the surf. The eagle swooped down and slashed the horse's muzzle with its huge talons. The horse reared up and kicked at the eagle's wings. As they fought, the ground rumbled, and a monstrous voice chuckled somewhere beneath the earth, goading the animals to fight harder. I ran toward them, knowing I had to stop them from killing each other, but I was running in slow motion. I knew it would be too late. I saw the eagle dive down, its beak aimed at the horse's wide eyes, and I screamed, "No!" I woke with a start. Outside, it really was storming, the kind of storm that cracks trees and blows down houses. There was no horse or eagle on the beach, just lightning making false daylight and 20-foot waves pounding the dunes like artillery. With the next thunderclap, my mom awoke. She sat up, eyes wide, and said, "Hurricane." I knew that was crazy. Long Island had never seized hurricanes this early in the summer, but the ocean seemed to have forgotten. Over the roar of the wind, I heard a distant bellow, an angry, tortured sound that made my hair stand on end. Then a much closer noise, like mallets in the sand, a desperate voice, someone yelling, pounding at our cabin door. My mother sprang out of bed in her nightgown and threw open the lock. Grover stood framed in the doorway against a backdrop of pouring rain, but he wasn't exactly Grover. "Searching all night," he gasped. "What were you thinking?" My mother looked at me in terror, not scared of Grover, but why he'd come. "Percy," she said, shouting to be heard over the rain. "What happened at school? What didn't you tell me?" I was frozen, looking at Grover. I couldn't understand what I was seeing. "Ozu, Kai, Alio, Thioi," he yelled. "It's right behind me. Didn't you tell her?" I was too shocked to register that he'd just cursed in ancient Greek, and I'd understood him perfectly. I was too shocked to wonder how Grover had gotten himself here in the middle of the night, because Grover didn't have his pants on, and where his legs should be. Where his legs should be. My mom looked at me sternly and talked in a tone she'd never used before. "Percy, tell me now." I stammered something about the old ladies at the fruit stand and Mrs. Dodds. My mom stared at me, her face deathly pale in the flashes of lightning. She grabbed her purse, tossed my rain jacket, and said, "Get to the car, both of you. Go." Grover ran for the Camaro, but he wasn't running exactly. He was trotting, shaking his shaggy hindquarters, and suddenly his story about a muscular disorder in his legs made sense to me. I understood how he could run so fast and still limp when he walked, because where his feet should be, there were no feet. There were cloven hooves. And cloven hooves, so you guys know. So essentially, this is him. There's his arms. Ignore my really bad drawing. Hands. Okay. There's his shoulders and his head. Man, ignore my terrible drawing today. Not the point, though. Okay. So normal on the top half. However, the bottom half, he had hooves. So he was like a goat on the bottom half. And cloven hooves, so down here, that means that their toes do this. And I'll show you guys a picture later. So like our feet look like this with our toes. Okay, this is what a goat's feet look like. So that's what Grover's feet look like. Don't worry, we'll explain it. Chapter 4. My mother teaches me bullfighting. We tore through the night along dark country roads. Wind slammed against the Camaro. Rain lashed the windshield. I didn't know how my mom could see anything, but she kept her foot on the gas. Every time there was a flash of lightning, I looked at Grover sitting next to me in the back seat, and I wondered if I'd gone insane or if he was wearing some kind of shag carpet pants. But no, the smell was one I remembered from kindergarten field trips to the petting zoo. Lanolin, like from wool, the smell of wet barnyard animal. All I could think to say was, "So you and my mom know each other?" Grover's eyes flitted to the rearview mirror, though there were no cars behind us. Not exactly," he said. "I mean, we've never met in person, but she knew I was watching you." "Watching me?" "Keeping tabs on you, making sure you were okay, but I wasn't faking being your friend," he added hastily. "I am your friend." Um, what are you exactly?" "That doesn't matter right now." "It doesn't matter. From the waist down, my best friend is a donkey." Grover let out a sharp, throaty "Bah!" I heard him make that sound before, but I always assumed it was a nervous laugh. Now I realized it was more of an irritated bleat. Goat, he cried. What? I'm a goat from the waist down. You just said it didn't matter. Mah! There are satyrs who would trample you underhoof for such an insult. Whoa, wait, satyrs? You mean like Mr. Bruner's myths? Were those old ladies of the fruit stand a myth, Percy? Was Mrs. Dodds a myth? So you admit there was a Mrs. Dodds? Of course. Then why? The less you knew, the fewer monsters you would attract, Grover said. Like that should be perfectly obvious. We put the mist over the human eyes. We hope you think a kindly was a hallucination, but it was no good. You started to realize who you are. Who I Wait a minute. What do you mean? The weird bellowing noise rose up again somewhere behind us, closer than before. Whatever was chasing us was still on our tail. Percy, my mom said, there's too much to explain and not enough time. We have to get you to safety. Safety from what? Who's after me? Oh, nobody much, Grover said, obviously still miffed about the donkey comment. Just the Lord of the Dead and a few of his bloodthirstiest minions. Grover. Sorry, Mrs. Jackson. Could you drive faster, please? I tried to wrap my mind around what was happening, but I couldn't do it. I knew this wasn't a dream. I had no imagination. I could never dream up something this weird. My mom made a hard left. We swerved into a narrower road, racing past darkened farmhouses and wooded hills, and pick your own strawberries signs on white picket fences. Where are we going? I asked. The summer camp I told you about. My mother's voice was tight. She was trying for my sake not to be scared. The place your father wanted to send you. The place you didn't want me to go. Please, dear, my mother begged. This is hard enough. Try to understand. You're in danger. Because some old ladies cut yarn? Those weren't old ladies, Grover said. Those were the fates. Do you know what it means? The fact that they appeared in front of you? They only do that when someone's about to die. Whoa, you said you. No, I didn't. I said someone. You meant you, as in me. I meant you like someone, not you. Boys, my mom said. She pulled the wheel hard to the right, and I got a glimpse of a figure she swerved to avoid, a dark, fluttering shape now lost behind us in the storm. What was that? I asked. We're almost there, my mother said, ignoring my question. Another mile, please, please, please. I didn't know where there was, but I found myself leaning forward in the car, anticipating, wanting us to arrive. Outside, nothing but rain and darkness, the kind of empty countryside you get when you're way out on the tip of the Long Island. I thought about Mrs. Dodds and the moment she changed into that thing with pointed teeth and leathery wings. My limbs went numb from delayed shock. She really hadn't been human. She'd meant to kill me. Then I thought about Mr. Bruner and the sword he had thrown me. Before I could ask Grover about the thing, the hair on my back of my neck. There was a blinding flash, a jaw-rattling boom, and our car exploded. I remember feeling weightless, like I was being crushed, fried, and hosed down all at the same time. I peeled my forehead off the back of the driver's seat and said, Ow. Percy, my mom shouted. I'm okay. I tried to shake off the daze. I wasn't dead. The car hadn't really exploded. We'd swerved into a ditch. Our driver's side doors were wedged in the mud. The roof had cracked open like an eggshell and rain was pouring in. Lightning. That was the only explanation. We'd been blasted off the road. Next to me in the back seat was a big, motionless lump. Grover! He was slumped over, blood trickling from the side of his mouth. I shook his furry hip, thinking, no, even if you are a half barnyard animal, you're my best friend and I don't want you to die. Then he groaned, food. And I knew there was hope. Percy, my mother said, we have to. Her voice faltered. I looked back. In a flash of lightning through the mud-spattered rear windshield, I saw a figure lumbering toward us on the shoulder of the road. The sight of it made my skin crawl. It was a dark silhouette of a huge guy, like a football player. He seemed to be holding a blanket over his head. His top half was bulky and fuzzy. His upraised hands made it look like he had horns. I swallowed hard. Who is Percy? My mother said, deadly serious. Get out of the car. My mother threw herself against the driver's side door. It was jammed shut in the mud. I tried mine. Stuck too. I looked up desperately at the hole in the roof. It might have been an exit, but the edges were sizzling and smoking. Climb out the passenger side, my mother told me. Percy, you have to run. Do you see that big tree? What? Another flash of lightning, and through the smoking hole in the roof, I saw the tree she meant. A huge White House Christmas tree-sized pine at the crest of the nearing hill. That's the property line, my mom said. Get over that hill and you see a big farmhouse down in the valley. Run and don't look back. Yell for help. Don't stop until you reach the door. Mom, you're coming too. Her face was pale. Her eyes are as sad as when she looked in the ocean. No, she shouted. You are coming with me. Help me carry Grover. Food. Grover moaned a little louder. The man with the blanket on his head kept running toward us, making his grunting, snorting noises. As he got closer, I realized he couldn't be holding a blanket over his head because his hands, huge, meaty hands, were swinging at his side. There was no blanket, meaning the bulky, fuzzy mass that was too big to be his head was his head, and the points that looked like horns. He doesn't want us, my mother told me. He wants you. Besides, I can't cross the property line. But we don't have time, Percy. Go, please. I got mad then, mad at my mother, at Grover, at the goat, at the thing with horns that was lumbering toward us slow and deliberately like a bull. I climbed across Grover and pushed the door open into the rain. We're going together. Come on, Mom. I told you, Mom, I'm not leaving you. Help me with Grover. I didn't wait for her answer. I scrambled outside, dragging Grover from the car. He was surprisingly light, but I couldn't have carried him very far if my mom hadn't come to my aid. Together, we draped Grover's arms over his shoulders and started stumbling uphill through the wet, waist-high grass. Glancing back, I got my first clear look at the monster. He was 7 feet tall, easy. His arms and legs looked like something from the cover of Muscle Man magazine, bulging biceps and triceps and a bunch of other seps, all stuffed like baseballs under veined web skin. He wore no clothes except underwear. I mean, bright white Fruit of the Looms, which would have looked funny except the top half of his body was so scary. Coarse brown hair started at about his belly button and got thicker as it reached his shoulders. His neck was a mass of muscle and fur leading up to his enormous head, which had a snout as long as my arm, snotty nostrils with a gleaming brass ring, cruel black eyes, and horns, enormous black and white horns with points you just couldn't get from an electric sharpener. I recognized the monster all right. He'd been one of the first stories Mr. Bruner told us, but he couldn't be real. I blinked my eyes. I blinked the rain out of my eyes. That's Fast-Faced son, my mom said. I wish I'd known how badly they wanted to kill you, but he's the min. Don't say his name, she warned. Names have power. The pine tree was still too far away, 100 yards uphill at least. I glanced behind me again. The bull man hunched over his car, looking through the windows, or not looking exactly, more like sniffling, nuzzling. I wasn't sure why he bothered, since we were only about 50 feet away. Food, Grover moaned. Shh, I told him. Mom, what's he doing? Doesn't he see us? His sight and hearing are terrible, she said. He goes by smell, but he'll figure out where we are soon enough. As if on cue, the bull man bellowed with rage. He picked up Gabe's Camaro by the torn roof, the chassis creaking and groaning. He raised the car over his head and threw it down the road. It slammed into the wet asphalt and skidded into a shower of sparks for about half a mile before coming to a stop. The gas tank exploded. Not a scratch, I remember Gabe saying. Oops. Percy, my mom said, when he sees us, he'll charge, wait until the last second, and then jump out of the way, directly sideways. He can't change directions very well once he's charging. Do you understand? How do you know all this? I've been worried about attack for a long time. I should have expected this. I was selfish keeping you near me. Keeping me near you, but... Another bellow of rage, and the bull man started tromping uphill. He smelled us. The pine tree was only a few more yards, but the hill was getting steeper and slicker. Grover wasn't getting any lighter. The bullman closed in. Another few seconds and he'd be on top of us. My mother must have been exhausted, but she shouldered Grover. Go, Percy, separate. Remember what I said. I didn't want to split up, but I had the feeling she was right. It was our only chance. I sprinted to the left, turned, and saw the creature bearing down on me. His black eyes glowed with hate. He reeked like rotten meat. He lowered his head and charged, those razor-sharp horns aimed straight at my chest. The fear in my stomach made me want to bolt, but that wouldn't work. I could never outrun this thing, so I held my ground, and at the last moment I jumped to the side. The bullman stormed past like a freight train, then bellowed with frustration and turned, but not toward me this time, toward my mother, who was setting Grover down in the grass. We'd reached the crest of the hill. Down the other side, I could see a valley, just as my mother had said, but the lights of a farmhouse glowing yellow through the rain. And the lights of a farmhouse glowing yellow through the rain, but that was half a mile away. We'd never make it. The bull man grunted, pawing the ground. He kept eyeing my mother, who was retreating slowly downhill, back toward the road, trying to lead the monster away from Grover. Run, Percy, she told me. I can't go any farther. Run. But I just stood there, frozen in fear as the monster charged her. She tried to sidestep, as she told me to do, but the monster had learned his lesson. His hand shot out and he grabbed her by the neck as she tried to get away. He lifted her as she struggled, kicking and pummeling the air. Mom! She caught my eyes, managed to choke out one last word. Go. Then, with an angry roar, the monster closed his fist around my mother's neck, and she dissolved before my eyes, melting into light, a shimmering golden form as if she were a holographic projection, a blinding flash, and she was simply gone. No! Anger replaced my fear. Newfound strength burned in my limbs, the same rush of energy I'd gotten when Mrs. Dodds grew talons. The bull man bore down on Grover, who lay helpless in the grass. The monster hunched over, snuffling my best friend, as if he were about to lift Grover up and make him dissolve too. I couldn't allow that. I stripped off my red rain jacket. Hey! I screamed, waving the jacket, running to the one side of the monster. Hey, stupid ground beef! Rawr! The monster turned toward me, shaking his meaty fists. I had an idea. A stupid idea, but better than no idea at all. I put my back to the big pine tree and waved my red jacket in front of the bull man, thinking I'd jump out of the way at the last moment. But it didn't happen like that. The bull man charged too fast. His arms out to grab me whichever way I tried to dodge. Time slowed down. My legs tensed. I couldn't jump sideways, so I leaped straight up, kicking off from the creature's head, using it as a springboard, turning in midair and landing on his neck. How did I do that? I didn't have time to figure it out. A millisecond later, the monster's head slammed into the tree, and the impact nearly knocked my teeth out. The bull man staggered around trying to shake me. I locked my arms around his horns to keep from being thrown. Lightning and thunder were still going strong. The rain was in my eyes. The smell of rotten meat burned my nostrils. The monster shook himself around and bucked like a rodeo bull. He should have just backed up into the tree and smashed me flat, but I was starting to realize that this thing had only one gear, forward. Meanwhile, Grover started groaning in the grass. I wanted to yell at him to shut up, but the way I was getting tossed around, if I opened my mouth, I'd bite my own tongue off. Food, Grover moaned. The bull man wheeled toward him, pawing the ground again, and got ready to charge. I thought about how he had squeezed the life out of my mother, made her disappear in a flash of light, and rage filled me like a high-octane fuel, and I got both hands around one horn and pulled backward with all my might. The monster tensed and gave a surprised grunt, and then snap. The bull man screamed and flung me through the air. I landed flat on my back in the grass. My head smacked against a rock. When I sat up, my vision was blurry, but I had a horn in my hands, a ragged bone weapon the size of a knife. The monster charged. Without thinking, I rolled to one side and came up kneeling. As the monster barreled past, I drove the broken horn straight into his side, right under his furry ribcage. The bull man roared in agony. He flailed, clawing his chest, then began to disintegrate. Not like my mother in a flash of golden light, but like crumbling sand, blown away in chunks by the wind, the same way Mrs. Dodds had burst apart. The monster was gone. The rain had stopped. The storm still rumbled, but only in the distance. I smelled like livestock and my knees were shaking. My head felt like it was splitting open. I was weak and scared and trembling with grief. I'd just seen my mother vanish. I wanted to lie down and cry, but there was Grover needing my help, so I managed to haul him up and stagger down into the valley toward the lights of the farmhouse. I was crying, calling for my mother, but I held on to Grover, and I wasn't going to let him go. The last thing I remember is collapsing on a wooden porch, looking up at a ceiling fan circling above me, moths flying around a yellow light, and the stern faces of a familiar-looking bearded man and a pretty girl, her blonde hair curled like a princess's. They both looked down at me, and the girl said, "He's the one. He must be." "Silence, Annabeth," the man said. "He's still conscious. Bring him inside." The end of chapter 4. Chapter 5 is called I Play Pinochle with a Horse. I don't think I've ever played Pinochle. I'll have to look that up, but that's a card game, I believe. Not sure where my Post-it went. Okay, let's switch the camera back around. Okay, so we are going to pause this video. I'm gonna start the other video and we are gonna do the notebook. And then you need to take that information and then I'll tell you what to do next in the next video. Thanks, guys. Bye.